Change is inevitable. It happens in video games all the time. Be it changes in the technology powering our systems, once popular games fading into obscurity, or gaming YouTubers self-imploding.
Thank you, you fucking worthless humans, for the views.
Games themselves also go through many changes and different versions, both during and after public release. Apart from the odd leak of an old build of a game that slips out onto the internet, most of the time the public receive the version of a game that the publisher intended them to have. However, every so often, the version of the game the public receive is not the one they were meant to. So, this episode, we take a look at these incorrect iterations, these volatile versions, and these botched builds. As I say, but hello you. I'm Guru Larry, and I welcome you to Fact Hunt. 5 times you were sold the wrong version of a game. Stranded miles away from humanity, having to survive on scraps of food you find lying around, and being surrounded by evidence something truly awful has happened? Yup, British caravan holidays are the worst things in the world. A close second, however, was the launch of the multi-format open world game, Dead Island. You're looking at the PlayStation 3 version here, which in itself is a poorly functioning mess, with a frame rate as about as settled as an ADHD sufferer after drinking 5 cans of Monster, and VSync, which, like Blizzard's moral conduct, is non-existent. But for as terrible as this version is, players who bought the game on Steam got it far, far worse. NPCs disappearing, characters clipping in walls, enemies not reacting to the player, weapons not behaving correctly, just all manner of bugs and glitches filled the game. The reason for the sheer amount of bugs became known shortly after release, and that's because developer Techland accidentally released a development build onto Steam instead of the final product. Both players and reviewers complained, and the studio quickly pushed out a patch to bring the game up to the version that was intended for release. Probably the wisest move, as naming one of the skills feminist whore in the beta version didn't exactly do themselves any favours either. But the patch fixed most of the problems that everyone had with the game, although it's left the escort missions in still. Apparently, they were an intentional part of the game. Having multiple iterations of every version of Street Fighter is pretty much par for the course with Capcom. The House of Mega Man add one extra feature, and before you know it, you've got Ultra Super Hyper Street Fighter Turbo Champion Dash EX plus Alpha Edition. In the past, this has been quite the money spinner for Capcom, releasing 3 separate full-price releases on the SNES alone. Then again, this is also the company that sold Final Fight on the Super Nintendo at full price twice, because they couldn't fit Cody and Guy on the same cartridge. However, one time, this constant rejiggering of theirs ruined an official Capcom Ultra Street Fighter 4 tournament. In 2015, the Capcom Pro Tour tournament was holding its event in California for the best players to come along to digitally kick each other's teeth out. The event was in full swing with some quarter-final matches already decided, when some players realised something wasn't quite right with the game. Turns out that even though the console had the updated 1.04 version of the game installed on a hard drive, someone had popped in a disc copy of the game into the console, and the machine was running the older 1.0 disc version instead. Capcom later declared that all matches played on the old version null and void, and they would all have to be replayed, which was a pain for players who would have to return another day for rematches, but especially so for one player who was Japanese and had to fly all the way back to America to replay their voided match. The tournament organisers paid for his trip back to the US, although he ended up coming 7th in the competition. So, much like Dan Hibiki, it was a complete waste of everyone's time. The PlayStation 2 had a ton of official WWE games, and for good reason. The WWE was extremely popular during the PS2's peak years, and video game renditions of everyone's favourite chair-related sport sold bucket loads. Over on Microsoft's console, however, things were a little bit different. There was only 2 official WWE games up until 2005, and they were both, well, complete arse. So Xbox-owning wrestling fans hoped that 2005's WWE WrestleMania 21 would change all of that. I mean, all the signs were there. It was being built especially for the Xbox, and it had online support, so you could body slam people from anywhere in the world. The pre-release footage looked good, and the lineup of characters looked promising. So how did this all go wrong? Pretty easy, really. Microsoft sent an old build of the game to the disc manufacturing plant, a version that couldn't even connect to Xbox Live. And when your major selling point of your console is the online service, well, that's a surefire way to annoy your customers. Fortunately for the clientele, Microsoft and THQ, it was possible to push out an update patch via Xbox Live for the game and get the whole issue sorted. However, they didn't use the opportunity to fix the frankly botched face of Val Venus though, and continued to let him look like he's holding back 10 years of crippling PTSD. Now, you might be expecting me to talk about the awful Atari Jaguar game, Fight for Life here. As the console's final game released, it was a complete mess, just like the machine it was made for. So, quite a fitting end for the Jag. Instead, I'm going to upset you by saying the words Ubisoft, and then upset you further by adding the words iPhone game. The title in question is Assassin's Creed 2 Discovery. And mentally stable people who don't play phone games may remember this same title from the Nintendo DS in late 2009. This was the period when Assassin's Creed was still a good series, before Ubisoft went to the side quest Overdrive and ruined the whole thing. Anyway, Assassin's Creed 2 Discovery on the Nintendo DS was an offshoot of the main series of games, designed with a far lower spec of the handheld in mind. Ubisoft, inspired by the huge sums of money games like Peggle, Doodle Jump and Bobby Carrot Forever were making on the iPhone, they decided to port the Nintendo DS version of Assassin's Creed 2 Discovery to Apple's money printing machine. So, in January 2010, Assassin's Creed 2 Discovery appeared on the Apple's App Store for $12. And then almost straight away, like Ezio himself, disappeared again. Phone gaming websites contacted Ubisoft about this and were told by representatives that an unfinished build had been accidentally uploaded and priced at a figure which too was incorrect. So if you bought this unfinished version in January at $12, you got double shafted, because the very next month in February, the finished version was placed onto the App Store at only $10. Which at the end of the day is still $10 too much for a Ubisoft phone game, let's be honest here. Playground's third term as a Forza Horizon game came out in September 2016 on both Xbox One and PC, and it only took 4 months for Microsoft to screw up the PC version. In January 2017, PC players were informed by the game that there was an update patch available, and upon beginning to acquire said patch, gamers were met with a download that was 53 gigabytes in size. So, what was in this patch? Every single car ever made? An entirely new world to drive around? Nope, It wasn't even an update patch at all. It was in fact a development build of the entire game. Having to download 53 gigabytes to find that out was bad enough. But from here the problems just started mounting up. The new version was corrupting save files for some players, meaning that they had to begin all over again. This is obviously a right pain in the neck. But to add insult to injury, any save file you started within the development build wouldn't work in the normal version designed for the public. So if your save game got wiped by the dev build, any new save you created wouldn't work in the next public version of Forza Microsoft put out after they realised their mistake. However, if you think this was all bad news for gamers, well, it was a much worse story for the House of Billy Gates. Because it was a development build players now had in their sweaty hands, it meant they could start data mining on a version they were never meant to see. And what they found was all the new cars Microsoft were planning to sell as DLC. DLC which was pretty much worthless to many PC users now, because having a development build of the game meant they could modify and change almost everything about it. So at least here on out, Playground Games treated the series with a lot more care and didn't break it again. Well, almost anyway. Hello you. Thanks ever so much for watching. Be sure to subscribe to be first to see future Fact Hunt episodes. Click on the bell if you already are to make sure you're notified, and be sure to check out my other episodes. And if you want to be super awesome, check out my Patreon. But thanks again for watching, and I'll be seeing you next time. Ta-ra for now.